On Friday, America celebrated its 249th birthday, and Trump marked the occasion by signing what he calls the Big Beautiful Bill into law. This sweeping legislation combines tax cuts along with a surge in military spending and raises the debt ceiling by perhaps another $5 trillion. And this is stacked on top of our existing $37 trillion of national debt. What does that mean for Bitcoin? It means the US is officially joining the global liquidity party as global M2 money supply hits new all-time highs. And Bitcoin, as always, is the perfect sponge to soak it all up. But the real fireworks were not legislative. They were personal. Elon Musk torched Trump for blowing up the deficit. Trump fired back, saying Elon has gone off the rails. That same day, Elon came back and announced the launch of the America Party, built on a platform of reducing the debt, defending free speech, advancing tech, and promoting families. When asked if the America Party would support Bitcoin, Elon did not hesitate. He said, "Fiat is hopeless." So yes. As Bitcoin flirts with new all-time highs, it's becoming more than just a financial asset. It's turning into a central issue in America's political future. And today I am joined by another American. We've got Joe Consorti in the house. How are you doing, my friend?
Doing fantastic. The vibes are high. The vibes are good. Hopefully my connection is all right. If not, I can turn a couple things off. But great to chat with you, Rob. We met in Vegas, America's 249th birthday. Nice, relaxing 4th of July long weekend, and ready to get back at it. Happy Monday.
Yes, we're back at it. And just to give the people, I'm sure, have seen your videos. You're all over the place. You've been in Bitcoin for years now. But one thing people might not know about is that you just launched a new company, correct?
That's right, Horizon. You can see on the little split screen, you can see our icon back there. But yeah, a new company called Horizon, and it's going great. We expected the launch to do pretty well, but it kind of blew our expectations out of the water. And, I thank God for that. It's really an idea whose time has come, and I'm excited to chat more about it. Obviously, we'll get into the headlines and talk about some of the big data points first and some of the big developments, big, beautiful bill, what Elon's doing. But on the Horizon front, we're just so stoked. And we have some really, really exciting things in the pipeline that I can't share yet, but it's going to be an exciting year for us.
Cheers, man. Yes, big things indeed. So yes, let's hop right in and we can start the conversation. So as we do every Monday at 11 a.m., we break down Bitcoin News Weekly. Our weekly newsletter comes out at 7 a.m. Eastern, and it gives you the top headlines in all the major categories, making sure that you don't have to spend your life scrolling on X like I do. And it gets you all caught up. You're ready for the week, and you know exactly what is going on in Bitcoin. So the title of today's publication is Bitcoin Starts to Feast as Liquidity Pressure Builds. From ETF inflows to state-level mining revenue, everyone still is not paying attention, and that is to our advantage. We've got our little mascot here. It's what does this look like to you? Do you know what this is?
Yeah, it's a honey badger.
There you go. You know the Bitcoin lore. Some people are saying it's a skunk. It's not a skunk. It's a honey badger. We still need to find a proper name for it. So if anybody's got any suggestions, definitely throw it into the chat, and we'll take it into consideration.
Bitcoin badger. There you go. It's alliteration.
Bitcoin badger. There you go. BB. Nice. So yes, just a shout out quick to Learning Bitcoin. They've got a great conference coming up in August. So about a month or so from now, if you are in the BC, Vancouver region, definitely check that out. Lots of big guest speaking, including BTC sessions. All the great Bitcoin Canadians will be there. Go check that out. So let's dive into the headlines. First of all, a big one is Wallet of Satoshi. Wallet of Satoshi returns to the US after exiting during the Biden administration, now operating as a fully self-custodial Lightning wallet using Spark on the back end. So Wallet of Satoshi for years was one of the most, if not the most popular Lightning wallets, but many people complained the fact that it was non-custodial, right? That you did not have private keys with it. Well, now they are working with Spark, and you are able to get those private keys. Some people, such as Blue Matt, a Bitcoin developer, was saying, going into the nuances of this and saying that it's not completely self-custodial, that they could still rug you to some extent on the back end. But I do think that this is a big leap forward, and Wallet of Satoshi seems to be one of the best orange pilling devices. It's a very simple wallet. You download it, you can get people to receive sats very quickly. And yeah, they had to leave last year because they were scared, right? When the Samurai devs were persecuted, they left the American market. But now under Trump, they are back. Joe, are you a Wallet of Satoshi user?
So I'm not a Wallet of Satoshi user, but it's one of the ones that I recommend to people. Yeah. Particularly now that it's running on Spark. I will say that the guys at Spark are awesome. We have launched a deal with them because we are going to be bringing them into the Thea ecosystem. Thea is our other company. So yeah, no, Wallet of Satoshi coming back to the US, hugely bullish. Self-custodial Lightning, hugely bullish as well. I mean, this is, I've said for quite some time that like if Bitcoin is going to be that medium of exchange that we want it to be, two things need to happen. Lightning needs to proliferate more. More people need to use it. And number two, we need to remove capital gains tax on Bitcoin so people can actually spend it, you know, and then receive it in USD. And so, you know, we're nearly there, right? I think a couple more things that need to happen, big things that need to happen. Stablecoin usage on Lightning needs to increase so that people actually transact in dollars on Lightning, which is possible now with Taproot assets. You know, shout out to the entire Lightning Labs team. You know, I got the chance to speak with them yet again in Vegas. And, you know, we were chatting. These things were just ideas 3 years ago. Nick Bhatia, my colleague over at the Bitcoin Layer, he had written about this, the time value of Lightning Network, or the time value of Bitcoin ages ago. And now it's happening. You have self-custodial Lightning. You have the ability to create stable coins on Lightning. And with Amboss, you have the ability to earn a Bitcoin native yield with no liquidation risk. And so now there's this yield curve that's emerging on the Lightning Network, which is going to make it so that capital markets, which are currently US dollar native, can be ported to Bitcoin. It can run entirely on Bitcoin. And that's what you need for something like Bitcoin to scale. You know, Bitcoin won't replace the US dollar over the next several decades. I don't believe that. But one thing it can do is it can offer an alternative to the traditional fiat US dollar rails. And that's what it's doing, right? With developments like Wallet of Satoshi, now having self-custodial Lightning, with Taro, with Rails, all these different developments of Lightning. It's extremely exhilarating because it means that people are going to use Lightning more. And some of those institutional allocators who are craving yield and therefore participating in the TradFi bond market by buying things like MicroStrategy preferred stock, now they can also earn a Bitcoin native yield by participating in the Lightning Network. Major developments, right? For retail, for institutions, a lot to talk about. But yeah, Wallet of Satoshi is something that I do recommend to people. And Spark is a fantastic team. So
cool. Yeah, tell us more. You guys are working with Spark. Are they helping you bring the Lightning Network to Thea?
Correct. Yeah. So we can't reveal too much now, but we are working on supporting Lightning inside of Thea, in addition to bringing stablecoin support to Thea. So I can't go into too much detail now, but ultimately what we want to do is make it so that Thea, right, this self-custodial multi-sig platform that we have built out, becomes even more functional. And so rather than sacrificing ease of use for security in traditional multi-sig, and that was the founding ethos of Thea, we're making it so that we're making multi-sig even more functional. And so rather than having a single sig for your day-to-day spending and then your multi-sig for your long-term holdings, you don't have to separate the two necessarily, right? You could have it all in one place. And so basically that's what Thea allows for. You create your single sig hot wallets, fully self-custodial. You create your multi-sig cold wallets, fully self-custodial. And then by integrating things like Spark, stablecoin, payments, and the Lightning Network, we're making it so that it's a more fully fleshed out platform, and it's the only Bitcoin self-custodial platform that people need. That's the ultimate vision with Thea, and with Spark, it's just one more step in getting there.
Cool, man. Wow, very exciting. Yes, going from multi-sig to an all-encompassing wallet. Yeah, the one-stop shop for all your Bitcoin needs right there on your mobile phone, right? That's beautiful. Cool. Yes. So speaking about wider adoption, we've got Germany's Sparkassen banking group to launch Bitcoin and crypto trading to 50 million customers across 370 savings banks. So this is Germany's largest banking group. And as we said, 50 million people will now have the ability to buy Bitcoin, trade Bitcoin on their banking platform. So we can go here. We should offer customers the opportunity to trade cryptocurrencies at the Sparkassen as well. They talked to Bloomberg, and the Bitcoin service will be integrated directly into the Sparkassen app. So customers can buy and sell Bitcoin as well as ETH. But the platform will be developed and managed by DekaBank, the investment arm of the company. So, I mean, Bitcoin adoption in Germany from a grassroots level has been extremely positive, right? They've got one of the strongest Bitcoin meetup networks. Finance, I can't say 21 in German, but the 21 in German is the name of their Bitcoin meetups across the country. And it's amazing to see the map of just all the dots, and just almost every single town across the country has some sort of a Bitcoin meetup where you can join in. And of course, Germany has the amazing tax laws where if you hold Bitcoin for over a year, you don't have to pay capital gains on it, right? And so now we're seeing these financial giants of Europe, such as the largest banking group in the country, is looking to allow Bitcoin trading straight there on the app. This is big news. Do you think that banks in America will follow suit, and that you'll soon be able to buy Bitcoin on your Bank of America or JP Morgan app?
100%. I mean, I think we're moving in that direction. So this is huge news out of Germany, particularly considering how tight Germany and the rest of Europe and the entire Eurozone generally is when it comes to Bitcoin. The whole MyCar license thing in 2025 has made it so that new businesses who want to operate in Bitcoin have to jump through 1,000,001 hoops. And so it's a huge development that this major German bank is talking about allowing customers to buy Bitcoin. And it's no, for now, it's Bitcoin and crypto, right? I mean, the crypto will always stick around. I put it in quotation marks. Over at the Bitcoin layer, we've put it in quotation marks since our inception in 2022 or 2021. And at Thea and Horizon, I put Bitcoin in quotation marks as well, or crypto in quotation marks as well. But this is a major development for Bitcoin. I do believe that we're on the way there in the United States. I mean, JP Morgan and others are now considering launching a stablecoin. I think they'll back off from that. Maybe they'll pursue it. Who knows? I mean, they've seen how profitable of a business it is for Tether, and so they want to get into the game. This is basically like another form of the Eurodollar system, right? I'll talk about stablecoins, and I'll talk about Bitcoin and things like that. So like them talking about building their own stablecoins, it's coming out of a need to transact in US dollars in a different ecosystem. The emergence of the Eurodollar network, which if you haven't read Nick Bhatia's latest book, Bitcoin Age, it talks about this extensively. So go check that out, Bitcoin Age. It's now on Audible as well. I helped edit it. It talks about the history of the Eurodollar system. And the Eurodollar system emerged because there was an emergent need for dollars in a market where dollars were not readily available. And then ultimately it got folded into the broader dollar ecosystem, and they just started being treated as dollars, right? Same thing's happening with stablecoins, right? So now these major US banks are talking about issuing stablecoins. And what does that mean? It means that chances are they're planning on entering into the Bitcoin market. They're exploring accepting Bitcoin as a form of collateral. You have other developments like the FHFA exploring the use of Bitcoin as an asset during loan qualification for mortgages. And so Bitcoin is being integrated into the broader global financial system, particularly here in the United States. It's really encouraging to see it in Europe because of those kind of Bitcoin antagonistic developments that happened earlier this year. They're pretty anti-innovation over there in Europe. And so seeing it happen in Europe is huge. And over in the United States, JP Morgan is exploring, using Bitcoin accepting Bitcoin as a form of collateral for loans. Mm-hmm. And so Bitcoin is well on its way to becoming this base layer asset of the global financial system, where it serves as pristine collateral, right? And by pristine collateral, I mean 24/7, 365, instant settlement, bearer asset, global. And so it's like Bitcoin is kind of on its way to fulfilling its destiny at the base layer of global finance, where it serves as collateral for, basically the majority of global commerce. Currently, U.S. Treasuries still fill that role, and they will continue to fill that role, in my mind, for decades to come. It's my mental model. I don't think the U.S. dollar is going away, but it shows that these banks are enthusiastic about incorporating Bitcoin. And it's not just a price thing, right? If it was a price thing, JP Morgan would have already launched a place to buy and sell Bitcoin. It's not merely a price thing. They're actually understanding Bitcoin's role in global finance and what it could do for them. So these are major developments, and they should not be scoffed at. I think people who are looking at banks getting involved in Bitcoin, they inherently get skeptical. They inherently get part of you gets upset, right? The Bitcoiner in you wants to just be a natural skeptic. It's good to be skeptical, but it's bad to be a permanent skeptic. If you're a permanent skeptic, you just turn into a pessimistic doomer. Recognize what this can do for Bitcoin, right? That's what I would say to people who might be skeptical. Recognize what this can do for Bitcoin, and also that these banks can't change Bitcoin. They're accepting it, right? And it will force the system itself to change. So Bitcoin is the ultimate Trojan horse, and it's working its way through the system now. Yeah.
Yeah, it's amazing to see just 3 years ago. I mean, banks wouldn't even look at this thing, right? And now they are fully accepting it. As you said, JP Morgan is looking into taking IBIT as collateral, and we've got German banks. And it does seem to be this play between both Bitcoin and stablecoins. They're both being pushed forward at the same exact time. And it's interesting that we're at this debt precipice, right? We've crossed $37 trillion in our national debt, and we see countries around the world wanting less of our treasuries, and there needs to be demand for this debt in order for this game to keep playing. And where does this debt seem to be have found an audience? With these stable coins. And you brought that up, stable coins, briefly just now. But before we moved on, I wanted to bring up this quote that we highlighted this weekend by Arthur Hayes in his latest newsletter. Arthur Hayes states, "The real stablecoin play isn't betting on crusty fintechs like Circle. It's understanding that the US government has handed the too big to fail banks the launch keys to a multi-trillion-dollar liquidity bazooka disguised as innovation. This isn't DeFi. This isn't financial freedom. This is debt monetization dressed in Ethereum drag. And if you're still waiting for Powell to whisper QE infinity in your ear before you go risk on, congrats, you're the exit liquidity." So yes, we just had the stable coin bill, the Genius Act, pass the Senate. It's not signed into law just yet, but it does seem as if we've got bipartisan support for stable coins in this country. And Arthur Hayes cuts straight to it, right? This isn't about financial freedom per se with the stable coins. Or expanding DeFi capabilities for the little guy. It's allowing these banks to get in on the game and acquire a lot. It allows them to acquire a lot more treasuries and take this debt burden off of the American government's back. So what do you think about this quote and about the future of stablecoins and American dollar hegemony?
Yeah, it's good for the United States. All right, it's good for the United States. There's this, I'll call it a misconception. There's this misconception that foreign holdings of U.S. Treasury debt have gone down. I actually have a chart to show, if that's all right.
Yeah, please.
I'm going to share let's see if I can actually share my window here. Okay. So this is on the Bloomberg terminal. This is just the debt function. And this shows, this shows foreign holders of U.S. Treasury debt. I can't collapse this side, so just bear with me. Take a look over here. There are entities who are divesting from U.S. Treasuries. China, obviously, they now only hold $821 billion worth of U.S. Treasuries compared to 5 years ago when they owned over $1 trillion. But on net, if you look at 5 years ago, foreign holders of U.S. Treasuries were at $7 trillion. They're now at $9 trillion, right? And so it's not that they're divesting or even that the rate at which they're investing is slowed. If you go back even to 10 years ago, if it'll allow me to go this far back, yeah, you can. You can see that there was a period during the mid to late 2010s, 2015 to around 2019, where foreign holdings were roughly flat at like 6.2 trillion. They're at 9 trillion now, and I'll show you the pie chart version of this, and this is for all the viewers as well. You can see 2024, just last year, foreign holders of U.S. Treasuries were 8 trillion. Now they're 9 trillion, and so as our issuance has increased, so too has our foreign holdings. They're still buying U.S. Treasuries. However, stable coins being brought into the mix is very good. It's very good for the United States. There's still this demand for U.S. Treasuries that's not going away. I'm not a U.S. dollar or U.S. Treasury doomer. I recognize, and it's important to recognize, that there's always going to be, so long as there's global commerce happening, there's always going to be a demand for U.S. Treasuries. And that's not me not recognizing the risks. Obviously, as we raise our debt ceiling and promise to increase our auction sizes, there is a risk that at the margin, some of these people, some of these investors will potentially stall out in the amount of US treasuries that they're buying. But the reality is that foreign holders are still buying US treasuries. All the Genius Act does is cement this huge new cohort of stablecoin buyers the huge new cohort of US Treasury buyers for the US Treasury, right? We know that Tether and Circle, they're some of the largest holders of US Treasuries. If you throw them up against foreign holders, I think they rank in the top 20, actually probably in the top 15 or 18 in terms of the amount of US Treasuries that they hold. They hold a lot of US Treasuries. And so what the Genius Act does is it just puts that into law. It basically says everything Tether and Circle are already doing, any company that wants to enter the space has to do the exact same thing, which prevents the likelihood of fraud. And it makes it so that this new cohort of US Treasury buyers is entrenched. So it does two things. It entrenches US dollar dominance, but it also makes it so that now one of Bitcoin's biggest on-ramps, which is stablecoins, is codified into US law. So it's great for the dollar and great for Bitcoin. My perspective has always been that the US dollar and Bitcoin are not antithetical to one another. They're not enemies. They're actually mutually beneficial for one another. US dollar dominance is good for Bitcoin, the United States being the most free and open market in the world, and also being the world's reserve currency. If the United States embraces stablecoins and Bitcoin as it's doing now, it's good for both the US dollar and Bitcoin, both in terms of capital investment and also US Treasury buyers for the next several decades to come as we shift into Bitcoin becoming a more broadly used asset. So that's what I'll say on that topic. I think it's all great. I don't take the doomer perspective of it's ideological capture of stable coins or it's some bad actor trying to get their hands on it. I think this is actually really, really great for Bitcoin and the US dollar.
Nice. No, it's good to hear a positive take on the stable coin situation in this country, because a lot of Bitcoiners will complain and say that we're just pushing forward dollar hegemony and our way to control global finance. But I do think there is something to say about the benefit to both Bitcoin and the dollar over the next decade. And America is pushing forward with all of this Bitcoin legislation and the strategic Bitcoin reserve, of course. But if we look over on the state level, some states are embracing Bitcoin, such as Texas, who just signed a strategic Bitcoin reserve bill into law and will seed it with $10 million. But on the other hand, we have Arizona Governor Katie Hobbs. She just vetoed House Bill 2324. Her third crypto reserve bill blocked this session. The bill would have created a Bitcoin and digital assets reserve fund using seized crypto. So Katie Hobbs, she has been not too kind. They were the first up to bat when it came to a pure Bitcoin strategic reserve. But she said, no, we should not be using our state funds to invest in such a volatile asset. And so now there's been multiple other bills to come across her desk. She did pass one that said that they could create a fund using unclaimed assets. So if Bitcoin has been left on an exchange for X amount of years, they're able to create a fund out of that. California recently passed a law along the same lines, saying that if you left your Bitcoin on an exchange for, I think it's either 3 or 5 years, they're able to put it into a pool. They won't touch it. They won't sell it for cash. And if you are able to come back and able to prove ownership of that Bitcoin, you are able to get it back. But yes, this latest bill that she just struck down is about seized Bitcoin, those that are gotten in through claiming a criminal funds, right? If it's taken in an investigation, she said, no, we do not want that. So the latest Arizona Bitcoin Reserve Bill has the fund was able to be managed by the Arizona State Treasurer and funded through digital assets seized by criminals. Under the plan, the first $300,000 from seized digital assets would have gone to the anti-racketeering revolving fund, and any remaining funds would be split 50% to the ARRF and 25% to the state's general fund and 25% to the reserve fund. Supporters of the bill argued that the fund would have helped Arizona adapt to the growing role of digital currencies in finance and law enforcement. but the bill has had a rough road through the legislature. It failed in the House in May, but was revived and passed 34-22 on June 24th after a narrow Senate approval. But despite all that, she came out and said it would harm relationships with law enforcement agencies. The bill disincentivizes local law enforcement from working with the state or on digital asset forfeiture by removing seized assets from local jurisdictions. So yes, Katie Hobbs, not a fan of Bitcoin, not a fan of it having anything to do with the state or her state treasury. Yeah, what do you think about Katie and her anti-Bitcoin stance over here?
Yeah, so in Arizona, I mean, it was Katie Hobbs versus Carrie Lake, and Carrie Lake obviously, I think she ran for Senate, and she didn't win, and then she ran for governor, and she didn't win. Really tough go for the Republicans, but the reality is, like, people say Bitcoin's apolitical, but at the very least, in Washington and in the United States more broadly, it is split down party lines, right? Mm-hmm. You have a handful of Democrats who do support Bitcoin, but largely Democrats are still anti-Bitcoin, right? Elizabeth Warren's kind of tweet and her messaging over the last several years, her infamous tweet about building an anti-crypto army. A lot of Democrats are still clinging to that narrative structure, and they're still clinging to that notion, of anti-Bitcoin, right? This tired old idea that Bitcoin is for criminals, right? When in reality, it's most of what my generation cares a lot about. If you take a look at people's asset makeup, Gen Z, of which I'm a part, owns a great deal of Bitcoin. And so, frankly, the Democrats' refusal to kind of move into this new world where Bitcoin is the main asset that the cohort of voters they need is holding, it's very bad for them. I've said this, and I'm relatively apolitical on X at the very least. I don't kind of believe, I don't really reveal what I believe all too much. But one thing I will say is that the Democrats will not win another election if they don't understand why they lost. They can't come around to why they lost. And one of the big reasons why they lost is alienating Gen Z, particularly alienating young men. And when you alienate young men, they're not going to vote for you, right? When you demonize young men and then you try to come after the assets that they own and say that they're used by criminals, they're not going to vote for you, right? And so this is completely antithetical to what the Democrats need. Connecticut did the exact same thing, I believe. Connecticut passed, basically said that they passed a law saying they'd never accept Bitcoin, put Bitcoin into a reserve or have a Bitcoin reserve. Mm-hmm. Moves like these are extremely short-sighted. Essentially, what the Democrats have decided to do instead of building out a platform is just be anti-Trump and anti-Republican at every turn. But what they need to do is try to figure out what the voters are looking for and what voters actually value, rather than just being avowedly anti-Republican and anti-Trump. Because there's a point, Trump won the popular vote and he won the Electoral College. And so he's been given a mandate by American voters, Gen Z included, the folks who can vote at the very least. And so when the Democrat Party is simply taking the position of just being anti-establishment, but the establishment was voted in by the popular vote, no longer just the Electoral College like it was in 2016, then the Democrats are fighting a losing battle, and they will not win another election until they figure out why they lost. In the same way, folks like Katie Hobbs and in Connecticut as well, so long as they're anti-Bitcoin, they will continue to lose, right? There's this understanding in some of the red states and some of the libertarian states like New Hampshire and Texas, who both have passed bills to create and fund a strategic Bitcoin reserve, that Bitcoin is the future. It's the asset that voters care about. And more importantly, it's important for not only their citizens, but for themselves as well at the state level, right? If they're going to beat the cost of living crisis, if they're going to make it so that their states become desirable and they don't have to raise state taxes as much because they have this reserve that is just doing all the work for them and absorbing all of that inflation, then it's good for their states. There's a recognition of that. But in Connecticut, in Arizona, and in other places, they haven't recognized that yet. And so those states will continue to lose. They will lose out on people moving out of there. Frankly, I don't know why people would want to live in Arizona anyway, given the weather. But that's beside the point. The reality is that states and countries who embrace Bitcoin will win. The ones that don't will lose, both in the electoral level and by people voting with their feet. Right? They will move out, just as they moved out in 2020 and 2021 and 2022. They'll continue moving out of those states.
You're 100% right. Bitcoin is growing in importance, as we can see in this survey just done by Troy Cross and the Nakamoto Project. They surveyed 3,500 adults across the country. And from their projections, they found that 48 million American adults own Bitcoin, 11 million hold their own keys, that Bitcoiners skew to be male, young, and non white. They're politically diverse but right shifted, and they're moral maximalists. And so, yeah, I mean, Arizona has gone against Bitcoin through the governor, of course. Connecticut did just pass the ban on all crypto or digital reserves, and that was unanimous. That was by both Republicans and Democrats in the state. But you could also blame that on the fact that Connecticut is so tied to Wall Street and the banking way of thinking, and do not look too kindly to Bitcoin just yet. But if you look at these numbers from this survey by the Nakamoto Project, yeah, it's young people, right? It really, the thickest band here is 31 to 35. Millennials and older, I guess, Gen Z are strongly into Bitcoin. The males disproportionately are into Bitcoin. And there is this growing political divide between, say, males and females in this country, especially in the younger demographics.
Yeah.
And Bitcoin seems to be a male-centric thing right now, but that's what we do here, right? We try to get the word out, explain that Bitcoin is good for everybody. Anybody who uses money is going to understand the need to store their value over time, and Bitcoin doesn't matter where you're from, your gender, or anything like that. It can help you and your family have a better financial future. So it's interesting how it's dividing along these political lines, these gender lines, but Bitcoin is the greatest monetary innovation we've had since paper money, I guess. And so that means that it is going to find its way into the wallets of everyone, no matter what your background is. But it's starting off with these young males, and we'll carry the torch until everybody understands just how important Bitcoin is. Cool. Yeah. So then, yeah, let's jump into the markets. Strategy had a big week last week. They announced a over $500 million Bitcoin buy. They started tapping the ATM again after about a month of not doing so. And they were also officially added to the Russell Top 200 index. So again, that means more passive flows into their stock. And they are also reporting eyes on a $14 billion unrealized Bitcoin profits in Q2. This morning, Strategy came out and said that they did not purchase any Bitcoin last week, which they tend to do at the end of quarters, I believe. But they also announced plans for a 4.2 billion at the market plan for Stride, one of their preferred stocks. So they're going to use their preferred stocks to tap the ATM and raise more money, $4.2 billion, to buy Bitcoin and to pay the dividend. So yes, what's your latest take on Strategy and their moves as we get halfway through 2025?
Yeah, so, I talked earlier about the demand for yield on Bitcoin native instruments and Wall Street. We already saw the success of MicroStrategy's latest preferred stock. Jesse Myers created a great graphic that showed essentially MicroStrategy preferred stock is pumping the $330 trillion worth of capital out of the bond market and directly into Bitcoin. This brand new vehicle and this just eye-wateringly huge $4.2 billion at the market program for Stride, which has, the characteristics of a bond, right? It's a preferred stock, but obviously it offers fixed dividend payments and a higher claim on assets during liquidation than common stockholders. And so this is another move by MicroStrategy to attract some of that, $330 trillion of global capital out of the bond market and into Bitcoin. And so ultimately the companies that are going to win over the next 5 years, 10 years, 20 years, 30 years are those companies that use clever financial engineering and intelligent leverage to siphon the monetary premium out of other global asset markets and into Bitcoin. MicroStrategy is handling it on the equity and bond side. Metaplanet is also handling it on the equity side. Semler Scientific, my friend Joe Burnett, is handling it on the equity side. And soon all of those people will probably issue bonds as well, or fixed income instruments. And so what we're seeing here is just the latest in that line of financial engineering that's designed to pump that capital out of other assets and directly into Bitcoin. And there's an appetite for it, right? These have been the most successful preferred stock and other financial instruments in the last several decades, the ones coming out of Strategy, right? Stride, Strike, and Strife. And so this is, it's just amazing to see. It truly is. And as far as the Russell goes, it's one of the three major US stock indices that I personally track and that most people personally track. You have the Russell, you have the NASDAQ, and you have the S&P 500. And so MicroStrategy, MSTR, it's still so hard to get over. Being included in the Russell is a major development because it's one step closer to S&P 500 inclusion. MicroStrategy is now eligible for inclusion in the S&P 500. It will be included in the S&P 500 ostensibly over the next couple of weeks or months, which is also quite amazing because of another development that happened last week. The big beautiful bill, $1,000 will be given to every American child, every American citizen child born after December 31st, 2024. And it will track the S&P 500. Essentially, they'll be given, this kind of early investment account, every child born. We're doing that with the savings from the big beautiful bill, of which there were few. I mean, there were huge spending cuts here and there, right? Like income and job requirements for Medicaid, which I personally agree with, right? There's been huge amounts of fraud and waste in the system from people who deliberately do not work so they can receive benefits, whether it be government-funded housing or food stamps or Medicaid. And so this is good. And on the flip side, right, even though it is a lot of money, it's something like a couple $1 billion in passive flows every single year that are going to go into the S&P 500, which is, an index that MicroStrategy will be included in ostensibly in short order, which means that even more passive flows are on the way for MicroStrategy, even more passive flows are on the way for Bitcoin. So it's great. I mean, it's all great news. It's great news for, the monetization and institutionalization of Bitcoin. I believe that this at the market offering is going to be completely scooped up by investors, just as Strategy's other preferred stock and their other offerings have been in the past. And I think more companies are going to follow suit. And it just goes to show the demand that there is for this sort of Bitcoin adjacent fixed income instrument in the market. It's all phenomenal news for Bitcoin. And again, people will shake their fist at this and get upset. But ultimately, this was going to happen. And either it can happen by companies that are run by Bitcoin evangelists or the big Wall Street banks, right? Mm-hmm. It's going to happen. Both of them are going to do it. But I think the naysayers and the people who are upset should be happy that it's the companies doing this first that are absorbing a lot of that appetite from the market are companies run by Bitcoin evangelists rather than companies run by people like JB Diamond.
Yes, and we will dive into that Bitcoin treasury company kerfuffle that you got on X this last week in a little bit. But before that, I mean, you're right. It's just there's so many times that you can hear in the last 2 years, the best performing ever of something, right? I mean, Metaplanet, best performing stock in Japan in 2024. MicroStrategy, I think, was number 2 last year behind AppLovin. Then we have, of course, the Bitcoin ETFs, right? They were the best performing ETF launch of all time. And we see that in this. BlackRock's Bitcoin ETF now generates more annual fee revenue, $186 million, than its flagship S&P 500 ETF, which brings in $183 million, despite IBIT just being 18 months old, as well as the fact that IBIT has, I think, $75 billion worth of assets under management, and IBV is a $609 billion fund, right? So, I mean, it just goes to show you how low the fees are on their IVV in order to be competitive with the rest of the market. But Larry Fink understands this. Bitcoin you have to be in this game. And every other financial institution in the world is seeing that the largest BlackRock here is making more money off of their Bitcoin ETF than their S&P 500 ETF. And you need to play this game or else you're going to be left behind. All right, everybody. Thank you so much. Yes, we're a little over halfway through the show. And we have 2,398 people watching live. Thank you so much for tuning in. If you are over on YouTube, go ahead and hit that like button. Helps a lot. And before we go any further, I would like to give a big shout out to our sponsor here today, which is Rhino Bitcoin. Rhino Bitcoin, they are your all-in-one Bitcoin super app built by Bitcoiners for Bitcoiners. With it, you can buy or sell your Bitcoin instantly, of course. You can send sats anywhere on the Lightning Network. You can withdraw your Bitcoin straight to cold storage, and you can even turn sats into gift cards or link to a Casa multisig, all within one sleek interface. And Rhino is just warming up. Soon you'll be able to pay your bills, borrow against your Bitcoin, and stack for retirement without leaving the app. Go ahead and download Rhino today at rhinobitcoin.com. Just tap the link below in the description. Use the code Bitcoin News, and Rhino will drop $10 of Bitcoin straight into your wallet today for free. So yes, secure your stack with Bitcoin. Rhino is very, very cool app, very easy to use, has a great educational segment too. You can go learn about Bitcoin and earn points, turn those points into sats. Then you can go ahead, take those sats, send it to your cold storage, go ahead, turn them into gift cards, do whatever you want with them. It's really a very cool place to go, learn about Bitcoin, earn your Bitcoin, and save. So yes, thank you very much to Rhino for being a part of this show as our lead sponsor. And I want to bring Joe back up here, and we can talk about these treasury companies. They are just eating up the headlines. You can't get away from it. And yeah, I mean, last week, Metaplanet added 1,005 Bitcoin to the total holdings, bringing it to 13,350. And they are, of course, are in Japan. In the middle of the night, just announced another big purchase. I believe it was 2,200, bringing it to 15,550 Bitcoin. They are now strongly within fifth place among public companies. And yeah, they have over 350% Bitcoin yield in 2025. What's your take on Metaplanet? Do you think that they are going to assume the number 2 position on the Bitcoin treasury list? And how close could they ever come to chasing Michael Saylor?
100%. I mean, first of all, well done to Dylan and Simon and the whole team over there at Metaplanet. They're just, pardon my language, but they're kicking ass. Hopefully it doesn't get you demonetized on YouTube, but they're crushing it. And, they're gunning for the number 2 spot. I believe they're going to get it. Not only because, right, it's spearheaded by Dylan, who's, such a brilliant dude, but also because Japan has a unique need for Bitcoin. They have a unique lack of access to Bitcoin, but also in Japan, particularly, they have a huge problem when it comes to their foreign exchange rate, but also their bond market. Their yields have been historically low, if not negative. They've run basically negative interest rate policy for ages through yield curve control and pinning yields artificially low. They tried to resolve it, but it was way too late. And so Japan is a country that uniquely needs Bitcoin, frankly, even more than the United States. And so they're going to succeed. They're going to succeed wildly. And I do believe they're gunning for the number 2 spot because they're in a country and a capital market that uniquely requires a company like Metaplanet to be doing what they're doing. So yeah, no, well done. I mean, they're accelerating their Bitcoin purchases and they're climbing up the leaderboard. I think it's only a matter of time before they reach that number 2 spot. And then from there, I mean, with Metaplanet, frankly, the amount of Bitcoin they're purchasing, sky's the limit. Of course, not financial advice. But yeah, no, I'm so stoked for those guys and what they're doing over there.
Yeah, and they've got a great narrative going around with them too, right? I mean, their shareholder meetings are packed. You've got people wearing Metaplanet merch in Japan. Had someone tell me that they were in Japan wearing a Metaplanet shirt and they were stopped on the street all the time. People saying, "Oh, Metaplanet," like it's
They have a fan base. They have a fan base,
yeah.
And that's what you need, right? You need investors who are just completely exhilarated by your company and your company's story. That's what you need, right? You need ravenous fans. Not just unassuming retail investors, but people who actually get it and actually understand it, and they're so passionate about it. So yeah, they're crushing it. I mean, they've got a fan base like no other. They have spaces and X communities and people wearing their merch, and they're doing a phenomenal job.
They absolutely are. And they're a big part of the reason that public companies have acquired more Bitcoin in the second quarter than the Bitcoin ETFs. So public companies have
Yeah.
acquired roughly 131,000 Bitcoin in Q2, and the Bitcoin ETFs are at 111,000. Right now, Bitcoin ETFs still hold more Bitcoin than the public companies. Bitcoin ETFs are roughly, I believe, 1.4 million Bitcoin, and the public companies are at around 850,000. But that could change by the end of the year, it seems. These public companies, more and more, are popping up every single day, and they are buying Bitcoin, including companies behind the scenes, right? If you are a private company, you do not need to disclose your quarterly Bitcoin purchases. And we've had Figma, the design app. They are now preparing to go public, and they reveal in their S1 filing that they hold $70 million in Bitcoin ETFs, and the board approved to purchase an additional 30 million in Bitcoin. So, I mean, Figma is one of the hottest names out there. Of course, they were going to be acquired by Adobe, but then that fell through. And so now they're going public on their own. And they've got $70 million of Bitcoin ETFs on their balance sheet because they know that having cash sitting there, as Michael Saylor says, is a melting ice cube. So do you think that there's a lot of private companies out there that are also stacking Bitcoin that we don't know about?
100%. I mean, I use Figma daily, so it's really great that, they secretly held Bitcoin. And I think two things, right? I think it's the future of Bitcoin treasury companies. I think that, there will always be demand in this day and age for basically, a zombie company to be basically scooped up, for them to scoop up an avid Bitcoin podcaster and make them the director of Bitcoin strategy, right? And then, basically just leverage public capital markets access to speculatively attack the dollar, and ape into Bitcoin. But I think more and more you're going to see private companies who are on the path to IPOing who have been holding Bitcoin for quite some time, because just as, Bitcoin is obviously hugely important for retail investors, looking for a more leveraged form of Bitcoin who buy these treasury companies, these bigger ones, but the private companies as well, and the smaller companies, and this goes down to Main Street as well. Bitcoin as a tool in your corporate treasury on your balance sheet helps you insulate yourself from market downturns, right? Ultimately, Figma is a software as a service tool. And, during market downturns where something like that might not be as in demand, people, if you can't afford Figma as a team, you hook everyone up with, a cracked version of Adobe Photoshop or something like that. And so software as a service tools, the revenue isn't nearly as sticky as other kinds of businesses. And so for those companies particular, but also for companies on Main Street, it's extremely important to have assets on their balance sheet that allow them to weather a market downturn. And so I think you're going to see more adoption of Bitcoin in private companies that people don't even know about. That'll be revealed to us when they IPO, but more broadly, companies that never planned to IPO, whether they're big private companies or companies down on Main Street, they're holding Bitcoin, whether it's a modest amount or a pretty huge sum, like in the case of Figma, because it's a tool for large public companies for one reason, and it's a tool for private companies and companies on Main Street for an entirely different reason. Well, frankly, the same reason. These companies may not have a public strategy where they leverage capital markets solely to purchase Bitcoin, but more modest Bitcoin treasury allocations. That's going to become the future, in the same way that companies hold U.S. treasuries or gold for these fixed dividend payments and for that monetary hardness. They're going to be holding Bitcoin for superior monetary hardness. It's 24/7 saleability, it's high liquidity, and all of its other factors that make it a better investment than gold.
Yeah, every company is going to become a Bitcoin treasury company at the end of the day, right? Everybody's going to have a balance sheet with some Bitcoin on it because that is the best way to preserve your purchasing power. So speaking about the number 2 on the list of Bitcoin treasury companies, that would currently be occupied by Mara, the Bitcoin miner. And they just announced a target of 75 exahashes by the end of 2025, a 40% increase from 2024, supported by existing machine orders and a 3 gigawatt low-cost power pipeline. So Mara is, of course, a mega miner. They've got huge farms across Texas and other parts of America. And I actually have a little video clip I would like to share of the CEO speaking, Fred Thiel, speaking to Bo Hines, the executive director of Trump's Digital Assets
Too, as we
Board?
set up the strategic Bitcoin reserve, it's like, how much Bitcoin do you want? And I think that's just a very silly question that journalists ask. We want as much Bitcoin as we can possibly accumulate. Now, obviously, we have to do that in these budget neutral ways, but I think that there's many creative ideas out there that we can act on.
And one of the great opportunities, I think, especially that solves two issues. One is helps the government accumulate Bitcoin and helps Bitcoin miners establish more hash rate in the U.S. is to partner with the U.S. government using energy potentially as a way to generate Bitcoin for the strategic reserve.
No, I think that that's a phenomenal prospect that we should certainly be keen on acting on. As we flesh out these ideas amongst the interagency working group, which was established in the president's first digital asset CEO, the president likes to say he has a lot of high IQ people in his cabinet, and I think he's certainly right about that. So we'll work with Commerce, we'll work with Treasury, Secretary Lutnick, Secretary Bessent, to find these creative solutions. But I think that a public-private partnership between the miners could be a phenomenal way to accumulate Bitcoin for the reserve.
So I think there's a lot to unpack there in that minute and 30 seconds. So yes, I mean, Bitcoin mining has exploded in America since 2021, and we are now well over 30% of global hash rate is within our jurisdiction here. And so, I mean, and of course, the Bitcoin miners played a big role in getting Trump on board in terms of the Bitcoin platform that he used to get elected, help him get elected in 2024. And now we have the head of Trump's digital assets board speaking to the CEO of Mara about a public-private partnership between the government and Bitcoin miners to accumulate Bitcoin for the strategic Bitcoin reserve. How does this sound to you? Do you think that this is plausible?
I do think it's plausible, right? If we talk about budget neutral ways in order to accumulate Bitcoin, there's one of the highest ranking ways to do that on the list, apart from cutting spending elsewhere and selling existing assets into Bitcoin, which is more of a congressional decision. Doing these types of deals, doing these types of partnerships with American-based Bitcoin miners is a great way of potentially accumulating way more Bitcoin. Right? You look at Mara, headed up by a guy like Fred Thiel, great CEO. And it really is a no-brainer, right? We've seen what operating in Texas can do for the grid in terms of, basically shutting off Bitcoin mining operations in times of distress. So that way there is additional electricity to keep the remainder of the grid on. It's huge from that perspective, but also from the perspective of the U.S. government basically has the power to partner with these companies, give them grants, in exchange for mining some of that Bitcoin and then accumulating it directly into the SBR. Not just for the state of Texas, but also for the United States government. So I think it's a great idea, right? If we talk about Bitcoin dominance, we want all of Bitcoin's hash rate to be in the United States. Frankly, I love my country and I would love for Bitcoin to succeed here. And I want the United States to be the Bitcoin capital of the world. And this is one method we could certainly use in order to make that happen.
Do you think that is good for the robustness of the Bitcoin network if we have over 50% of the hash rate within America?
Given that America has the most free and open capital markets, and I don't envision that changing anytime soon, I do think so, right? Yeah. And we see, obviously, we talk about robustness, oftentimes people conflate it with decentralization, right? Is it good to have more than 50% of the hash rate in the United States if we want to keep the Bitcoin network robust, right? I think so, because you not only have to consider decentralization, there are 50 states in the United States, first things first, each with different laws and different jurisdictions. And so it is spread out, but you also have to consider the openness of U.S. capital markets and, the laws that we have and the United States Constitution. And so frankly, businesses are going to choose and governments are going to choose how to incentivize Bitcoin mining. And so this move by the U.S. government, if they do decide to begin partnering up directly with Bitcoin miners and mining Bitcoin for the reserve for that purpose, then other countries are going to follow suit or they're going to fall behind. And so it's all down to businesses and where they'd like to move. Bitcoin miners can, fire up anywhere all around the world. I mean, right now I have a BitAxe sitting on my desk in front of me, right in front of my microphone. And so I'm mining Bitcoin, right? And other people around the world can choose to do the same. And so this is just one move by the US government that if they choose to do it, it will make Bitcoin more decentralized. But I do believe that having the lion's share of hash rate in the United States does make Bitcoin mining more robust. Because if it's in places like China, we can see what that does to the hash rate if they decide to ban Bitcoin unilaterally, which they can, but you can't do in the United States.
Yeah, and I mean that's one thing that's so fascinating about the Bitcoin mining story is that it is a global phenomenon, right? And it gets banned in China, it moves over to America, but also when we saw the China ban, we also saw a huge shoot up in the number of Bitcoin miners moving to Ethiopia. I think Ethiopia and China have close commercial relations. And there is also one of the world's largest hydro dams within the country. But the big problem with that system is that there aren't enough power grids and power stations spread throughout the country to really make use of all the energy that is being generated by this giant hydro dam. So, big news out of Ethiopia in terms of Bitcoin mining is that they reported a $200 million in Bitcoin mining revenue over the last 6 months, so the first half of 2025. And this windfall will help expand the power grid, which currently has just 22 power stations and 192 substations. So the thing about electricity generation is that you create it in one space, but it doesn't mean that you can automatically get it to everywhere in the country. You need to have the whole entire network set up, and by mining Bitcoin where the power is being generated, they're able to raise the revenue and create more power stations across the country and expand electricity into the regions of the country that didn't have it previously. So this is a really cool story, and one of the beautiful things about Bitcoin and Bitcoin mining is that it goes out, finds the cheapest electricity in the world, and it's like a pioneer species bringing electricity to these places that didn't have it previously. So very cool piece there. Yes, and I think I would like to close out today's show by bringing up something you brought up at the beginning, which was about eliminating capital gains on Bitcoin in order to make it more like money in our country. So in the big beautiful bill, there was a last second attempt to try to get a de minimis exemption for Bitcoin on small transactions, but that was not able to be included. So Senator Loomis decided to go out on her own and introduce digital asset tax reform, including a $300 de minimis exemption per transaction for Bitcoin and digital assets, capped at $5,000 annually with an aggregation rule and inflation adjustments starting in 2026. So yes, everyone has said for a very long time that this would be by far the best thing that America could do for Bitcoin adoption within the country. Do you agree?
I do agree. I mean, you already have plenty of cohorts who are buying Bitcoin actively. The United States government being another one of them is a huge development. But I'd argue that the biggest development in advancing Bitcoin from where it is to where it's going is eliminating capital gains tax on BTC. And this is a step in the right direction. Obviously, we'd all love if it was eliminated completely, right? If Bitcoin could be treated as the money that it actually is. But this is a start, right? And this means that those smaller payments, going and buying a coffee, with Bitcoin won't be taxed. And guess what that means? That means coffee shops will be able to accept Bitcoin directly into a Bitcoin treasury that they have. It might be an operating vault, and every $250 or $300, they either segregate it into a different account for tax purposes, or they flip it into US dollars. And it means that they don't have to flip it into US dollars directly at the register, which means that the individual gets taxed when they buy their coffee. And so for the time being, it's these de minimis transactions, but it is a step in the right direction, right? And it's just the way that things work in DC. You're not going to, get a sweeping legislation that means that capital gains tax on Bitcoin, this emergent asset, that's the 7th or 6th, I don't know at this point, largest asset in the world. You're not going to get an overnight total exemption of capital gains tax for an asset of that size, because it's still a major form of tax revenue for the United States. But I do think that with the Trump administration being so avowedly pro-Bitcoin, and with us having a majority Republican Senate and House, now's the time to pass this thing. And it means that Bitcoin is moving in the right direction of becoming a medium of exchange after it is fully consumed being a store of value. It is several $1 trillion to go. I'd argue hundreds of trillions of dollars to go before it moves from that store of value to medium of exchange. But getting the ball rolling now so that that transition can occur smoothly will be huge.
Yeah, and we gotta use the momentum while we got it, right? Next week we have it's called Crypto Week within the House of Representatives. They're hearing things on the Clarity Act. They're looking back over the Genius Act, and on the 22nd we will hear new news about the strategic Bitcoin reserve out of the Trump administration. So lots of big headlines coming out of Washington, D.C. And hopefully, as you said, that'll push forward Bitcoin as not only a store of value, but also a medium of exchange. So we're getting towards the end here, but before we go, I would like to do our weekly wheel section where we give away 21,000 sats based off of the answers, those who answered correctly to the trivia section. So if you are a reader of Bitcoin News Weekly, go and answer this trivia question and you will be entered into the competition for next week. So let's see who won by answering correctly last issue. And the winner is nice, Naspiri 2. So yeah, we will reach out to you. Make sure you get your sats, and everybody who reads the newsletter, subscribes, takes part in the trivia, you too can win 21,000 sats by just learning more about Bitcoin. So Joe, before we go, you hinted at Horizon, but I want to hear some more. Tell us.
For sure. Yeah. So Horizon's really cool, right? What I'll say, I'll preface it with this. You know, we talked about Saylor earlier on. We talked about how strategy is basically using the bond market and siphoning that capital into Bitcoin. They're using the equity market and bond market to do it. Metaplanet is siphoning the 300 trillion or the 150 some odd trillion dollars in equity capital in the world into Bitcoin. So to Similar Scientific and all these other treasury company names, the single largest global asset is real estate, $370 trillion in size. And there are currently no direct on-ramps to take the capital of one and funnel it into the other. You can do a HELOC, but ultimately that's a loan. You can do a reverse mortgage, but ultimately that's a loan. What we've done with Horizon is we have created a direct on-ramp from real estate into Bitcoin. You know, we're starting with the US market, right? So there's 35 some odd trillion dollars of capital locked up in home equity in the United States. Horizon allows you to stack Bitcoin using your home equity with no monthly payments, no interest charges, and no term limits, and you retain Bitcoin ownership throughout the life of the deal. It's extremely cool. And you can check it out at joinhorizon.com. Currently, we're live in 15 of the 50 US states. Ideally, over the next several weeks and months, we aim on launching across more. But what I'll do is I'll actually share my screen really quickly so you can see the website. It's an extremely cool offering. And ultimately, you know, I'm of the belief and we're of the belief that real estate is one of the most underserved markets when it comes to Bitcoin adoption, and we're helping to change that. We were recently featured in Bloomberg, and the New York Times, and Yahoo Finance. We launched in late May, and the success has been completely astronomical beyond what we could have ever imagined. And so if you are sitting on a lot of home equity, dormant home equity, and you'd like to stack Bitcoin using it, then you can visit joinhorizon.com to learn more. You could book a one-on-one call with me. You could enter your address and take a look and see how much Bitcoin you could get based on your property value and your mortgage balance. And yeah, that's what Join Horizon is. You can go check it out at joinhorizon.com. Extremely exhilarating. And like I said, we have some amazing news that we can't exactly announce yet, but some cool stuff is brewing on the horizon, for Horizon, pun intended.
Amazing. No, that's so cool. And just, I mean, Bitcoin is seeping into every single facet of the American financial system, and you gotta get some in case it catches on, right? And using your home equity in order to do that is a smart way, because most Americans, most of their wealth is within their home equity, is it not?
Absolutely, it is. It is. Americans' home equity represents 30% of their wealth. That's more than the retirement accounts, right? At 25%. And so you're probably listening at home and you might have a parent, or you yourself might be sitting on a lot of home equity, and the options available to you, either they come with monthly payments, which means you have to adjust your lifestyle, you know, or they come with a fixed term, right? And other solutions out there, you have to give up Bitcoin upside. Horizon doesn't do any of that, right? You keep the Bitcoin for the life of the term. You self-custody it, and we're not entitled to any Bitcoin upside as payment, right? The only upside is the value on the house. And so essentially, if you're looking for a way to either get off zero or expand your stack to potentially one full BTC, then Horizon is a potential avenue for you to do that without disrupting your lifestyle, with upfront tax implications when you are wired the cash to do this, or monthly payments throughout the life of the term. So people are excited about it, and there's every reason to be, right? Homes are extremely inflated. They're at their highest level ever. So check out joinhorizon.com. You can use our calculator tool and see how much Bitcoin you could potentially get for your house.
Wow, cool. Very nice. And congrats on the instant success, man. It really seems like you hit it out of the park with this. So
thank you.
Amazing stuff. All right, everybody. Thank you so much for tuning in. Be sure to sign up for Bitcoin News Weekly, our weekly newsletter, and tune in every Monday at 11 a.m. where I have a new guest come on and chat about the biggest headlines in Bitcoin. Joe, it's been an absolute pleasure, and I hope to have you on sometime again in the future.
Absolutely. Thanks a lot, Rob. Thanks, guys.
Bye-bye.